Hello, everyone, and welcome to Camino Conversations. My name is Rebecca Weston, and I have a business and Substack called the Camino Calls. I help people plan their walks on the Camino de Santiago, and I also lead small group trips on the Camino de Santiago. And speaking of that, I'm very excited because I'm this close to announcing my trips for 2026. So, all of that you can find at inspiration.thecaminocalls.com. You can join me there. I publish a newsletter every Sunday, and every Wednesday I try to get on Substack at 11 and have in conversations with people who have done the Camino de Santiago. But up until this point, and it's been a year that I've been on Substack, I have not actually told my own Camino story. So I'm going to start out answering the questions that I ask my own guests. So, welcome to those of you that are joining me live. If any of you would like to ask any questions, feel free as we're going along. So, the first question that I always ask my interview guests is, how did you first hear about the Camino? So, for me, the Camino came on my radar in the year 1999, 2000, somewhere around there. Shirley MacLaine was on a morning news program. And at the time, I knew she was famous, but I didn't know what for. She was a little bit before my time. But she was talking about this walk she had done across Spain and this book that she had written about it. And I filed it away thinking that would be cool to do sometime. And this was back in the day where wandering around bookstores was a really, something I enjoyed doing. And I still do, but it's a different experience these days. This was so back in 2000. Anytime I went into a bookstore, I would go to the travel section and I would find books on Spain and I would look up in the index Camino de Santiago. And I would find like a paragraph, maybe this big about the Camino. No one I knew had ever heard of it, let alone done it. It was not nearly as popular as it has come to be these days, and so I just kept it on my radar. I knew one day I would get to it, and so the next question then that I usually ask my guests is, how did you go from dreaming it to doing it? Well, in 2011, I painted a section of the wall of my living room with whiteboard paint. So I actually had a whiteboard in my living room and I jotted down some things that I wanted to do that year and kind of came up with this idea that I was going to take my own 1 year sabbatical. And I had saved up some money to do that. I wasn't going to work for a year. I was going to do a bunch of traveling, do things that I had wanted to do for a while. And at the end of that sabbatical year, I was going to finally walk the Camino de Santiago. I will say that I thought at that time that the Camino de Santiago was one trail that started in one specific place and ended in Santiago de Compostela. I now know that the Camino de Santiago is a network of pilgrimage trails across Europe, actually, and you can start in pretty much any place you would like. But at the time, I thought the only place you could start a Camino was in Saint Jean Pied de Port, France, and walk 500 miles across Spain. So that's what I set out to do. Now, for those of you thinking that perhaps I had some interest in physical activity like this, I would like to tell you not at all. I hated gyms. My various boyfriends had these visions of us working out together. Never happened. Gyms to me were boring beyond all belief. I did like, going for walks, but only if it was to someplace interesting. The idea of just getting on a machine and just staying on that machine for an hour was just beyond my comprehension. So no, I was not into exercise or physical fitness or any of that kind of stuff. I had never done anything like this before. I knew the Appalachian Trail existed, and I knew I would never, ever want to do that. For those of you that are not aware, the Appalachian Trail is a huge trail that goes up the eastern seaboard of the United States, and it is absolutely, completely, almost 100% different from the Camino de Santiago. um, on the Camino de Santiago, you stay in a bed every night and you take a hot shower and you can have coffee in the morning. And on the Camino, you are not carrying, well, some people carry a tent, but you don't have to. You don't have to cook your meals over a gas burner or anything like that. So the Camino de Santiago is pretty much as far as you can get from the Appalachian Trail. The only similarity in my eyes is that you're walking every day. The other thing about the Camino is you're walking through cool little towns, and you're meeting people from around the world. Whereas the Appalachian Trail has something called the Green Tunnel, which basically means all you see are trees for I don't know how many days or weeks on end. So yeah, the Appalachian Trail had zero desire, zero interest to me. And thank you, Rachel. Yeah, the Camino de Santiago sounded like much more my type of walk that I would enjoy. So that's why I kept looking into it and decided I would do it. Now, I will say that I had done a couple physically challenging things in the past, but both of them were kind of like the Camino in the sense that I didn't really know what I was getting into. It just sounded like a cool thing to do. Like a dozen years earlier, I had walked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and more importantly, walked back out of it, which was the harder part for me. By the time I did it with a boyfriend, and by the time we got to the top, I mean, he was carrying everything in his backpack. I had nothing on my back. I was in tears. I mean, this was not the most pleasurable experience. I loved it now looking back, loved walking down there, loved the experience of doing the hike. But coming back up was like terrible. Um, I think it's been enough years now that I would perhaps attempt it again. But anyway, and that wasn't planned either. Actually, the Camino was much more planned than that hike was. That hike, I knew it existed. I knew it would be cool to do, but my boyfriend and I were on this road trip, and he didn't want to commit to having to be any place at a specific time. So I literally, when we got to the Grand Canyon, I just went up to a park ranger and I said, "Hey, what are the chances of getting a spot to stay down at the bottom? Because there's only limited spaces for people to stay." And the park ranger said, "Well, do you have a reservation?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, call down there because they do have cancellations sometimes." And I called and they had a cancellation. So I booked us to stay at the bottom of the Grand Canyon the next night. And then I went out and told my boyfriend what we were about to do. And so we kind of drove around trying to get stuff to hike down there. I don't recommend this method, but it worked back so many years ago for us. So I made it out of the Grand Canyon. The other big thing that I had done physically was RAGBRAI, which is the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. I will say right off the bat that I did not ride across the entire state of Iowa, but I would ride about 20 miles or so. And then at the halfway mark or so, we had a support vehicle with us. There was a group of us that did this together. I would get in the car with her and drive ahead to the next town. The day that it poured rain, I was like, "Forget it, I'm not doing this." So the RAGBRAI is I think it's like 10 or 15,000 people that do this bike ride a week in July every year. It's a blast, except for the whole part of having to ride your bike for 40 miles. So anyway, those are the kinds of physical things that I would sometimes do, but really for the experience as opposed to because I had any physical ability or desire to like tackle something really big and crazy. It was more that I wanted to do something where I would meet other people, where it was just a cool experience, see something I hadn't seen. And so those are the things that appealed to me about the Camino de Santiago and these other things. So I start out my 1-year self-imposed sabbatical, and I started out at a place called the John C. Campbell Folk School. And for those of you that don't know, this is I call it like summer camp for adults. It's in Western North Carolina. You go and you take week-long classes and everything from cooking and weaving to blacksmithing and wood turning. And the first part of my year sabbatical, I was a volunteer there. I was a student host for, I think, 3 months, which meant that I did some work in exchange for taking a different class every week. So I took wood turning and bead making and genealogy and Scottish cooking and blacksmithing and all of this. While I was there, that's the first time I ran into people who had actually ever heard of the Camino de Santiago. So we are in the fall of 2011 at this point. Yeah, the folk school is definitely a great thing. I highly recommend looking up the John Campbell Folk School. So I was there, and one of the weeks there was a guy who was there's different, so you might have 10 different classes that are going on the week that you're there. And one of the classes while I was there was a hiking class. So they would get up in the morning and they would go out for a hike all day. And I'd see them come back in the evening and they just looked exhausted. And I was like, well, thank God I'm not doing that class. Who would want to go do that and come back exhausted every night and then just wake up and do it again tomorrow? Ironically, that's what the Camino could be. So, but anyway, at the time I was like, there's no way I would be interested in doing that. But the teacher of this course, when he had heard about the Camino, and he said, "Did you start training yet?" And at this point, I think it was around October of 2011. I was supposed to go in May of 2012. And I'm thinking, why do I need to start training now? It's like months and months away. And he was like, you need to get out there and start walking, da da da. And thankfully, I had the wisdom to realize I'm going to do this on my own terms. Thank you for your advice. And I just, let him go at the end of the week and continued doing my fun stuff at the John Campbell Folk School. So he wasn't as intimidating as he initially sounded to me. So anyway, at the folk school, though, was the first time I met people who had heard of the Camino. I met one person who had actually done it. And then I met a few other people who said, oh, yeah, my sister-in-law's best friend's brother did it or whatever. And they would say, do you want me to put you in touch? And I was always like, yeah, sure, that would be great. And I was amazed because these people would get on the phone and talk to me for 30, 45, an hour, answering all of my questions about the Camino de Santiago. And I promised myself that when I got back, I would have to figure out a way to pay it forward. I get chills now even talking about it. I just couldn't believe these complete strangers talked to me for this long period of time to share their experiences and were so excited for me that I was going on the Camino. And so that was the first experiences I really had of hearing from other people who had actually done this thing. I think still I probably didn't realize. I mean, I knew I was gonna be walking 500 miles. I don't think I had really visualized or conceptualized, like, what that was gonna be on a daily basis. But yeah, as Rachel just wrote in the chat, people, in general in the world are so generous if you are looking out for it and open to it. And that is one of the things that I learned through this whole process of preparing for the Camino and being on the Camino. I mean, I've got tons of stories of people just doing things that, out of the goodness of their hearts, people that would probably never see again. And so, I encourage all of us to continue to remember that people are, and in their hearts, they want to help each other, and it's okay to ask for help, to accept other people's help. I had on this Camino, actually, this was the first time someone had told me about accepting other people's generosity. She said, it's not all about you and whether or not you want to accept their help. She said, you have to recognize that for them, this is a gift they're trying to give you, and you shouldn't turn down a gift that someone's offering you. And I had just never looked at it like that. And so she said, by accepting generosity, you're actually helping them to feel good about themselves. And this just blew me out of the water. I hadn't ever thought about that before. And one of the many, many, many lessons that I took from my Camino. And yes, Phil, I see in the notes, feel free to quote me on that. So finally, we get to the point where I do finally start training. For my training, I got a pedometer. This was back in the day. I don't think your cell phones could track nearly what they get tracked today back then. Again, now I'm in like January of 2012. So I had a pedometer and I wore it all day. It was literally on the nightstand. I put it on as soon as I got up in the morning, like literally, put it on my pajamas so I could count the steps on the way to the bathroom, before I, took my shower, and then I'd put it on whatever clothes I was wearing that day. And so I counted every single step I walked in an entire day. And I would start out with a morning walk. And to make it more interesting, I would call friends or things like that, to chat while I was out for my walk. And this was still this year that I was doing the sabbatical. So I was traveling all over the US at this point, and I would tell friends when I went to visit various friends, I'd say, hey, you want to go for a walk? And a lot of them would say, "Oh, but you're probably gonna go too fast for me." And I would say, "It's not about the speed, it's about the steps." So, if we could just go for a walk, I don't really care how fast or slow we go. Anything's better than me sitting here talking to you. It's better if I can get out and we can do this while enjoying a walk wherever. And so I got to see some great places around the Eastern US because I was visiting friends in Florida and Virginia and Maryland. And so it was a really cool way to kind of train for the Camino. And what I did was the first week, I just had the pedometer on so I would know how much I did on average in a regular day without trying. And then every week thereafter, I added 1,000 steps more. So if I started out with whatever, 7,000, the next week I would try and do 8,000 steps every day. And the next week, 9,000 steps every day and 10,000 on and on and on. And so by the time I got to May 2012, when I was leaving for my first Camino, I was up to walking about 8 miles per day. Now, I know this is not possible for a lot of people in the days leading up to their Camino. But you have to remember, I was on this, this year-long sabbatical, and so I had the time and could make the time. I usually tell my clients that if you and also remember, I was about to embark on a 500-mile Camino. A lot of my clients do their first Camino, like maybe 60 miles, 62 miles, something like that. And those folks, I say, if you can walk 5 miles back to back days, you're going to be okay. So just to put that into perspective. But yeah, if you're going to embark on my Camino, my first Camino ended up being 37 days. And I needed a little bit more training for that. So just want to take a moment to thank all of you who are joining me live. I really appreciate it. And for those of you that are watching the recording, I love you all too. And I'm glad you're interested in hearing my Camino story. So again, if you have questions as I'm going on and on about this experience, feel free to ask me. So I finally get to book my flights because I was using frequent flyer miles. I was very good at playing that game with credit cards where you spend so much and they'd give you like 50,000 miles. And so I did all of my traveling that year on airline miles. I was a little short when I first was wanting to book this trip, and I just put something on Facebook, not asking for anything, but just saying how excited I was that soon I'd have enough miles to book this trip. And a friend of mine reached out and she said, "Oh, I've got tons of miles. How many do you need? I'll give them to you." And so just that generosity, like I'm getting chills now just talking about it. Like some people say the Camino starts from the moment you decide to do it, from the moment you start training, from the moment you book your flight, from the moment you leave your house. So the Camino starts long before you actually step foot on the trail. And I definitely had that experience. I mean, the people who walked with me, I was just so grateful that they were like, "Oh yeah, sure. There's this cool state park. We'll go walk there." And then this woman who did who gifted me her airline miles. Like, what a generous gift. So Emma asked which route I did for my first Camino. My first Camino, I did the Camino Frances because I thought that was the only Camino route there was. I started in a little tiny town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, and I walked over 500 miles to Santiago de Compostela because I thought that was the ending point. It turns out you could continue walking to the ocean if you wanted to, and I met some people that were doing that, and kind of talked to my body, and my body was like, "Yeah, no, we're getting to Santiago," and that's all I got. So yeah, so Phil had asked, what's the minimum length that someone can do the Camino and have this transformative experience? And I would say you could do it over a week. The minimum. So there's a thing called the Compostela, which is the certificate you get at the end if you've walked a minimum of 62 miles or 100 kilometers on the Camino de Santiago. And a lot of people, that's what they do for their first Camino. And I say their first Camino because a lot of people get hooked on walking Caminos. So yeah, if you have a busy life, you could totally do this as a week-long vacation. A lot of people will do those 60-kilometer routes. They'll walk the actual route in 5 or 6 or 7 days. So don't forget to count your travel days there and back, because otherwise you're going to have to walk a lot faster, because I've met people that forgot that it takes something to get from your ending point back to wherever you got your flight in from. So So I flew, this was now in May of 2012, and I flew from New York. I'm from New York State originally, to Charles de Gaulle, in Paris, transferred to the other Paris airport, Orly, and then arrived in Biarritz, France. From there, I took a bus to Bayonne and then a train to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And then at the train station, this lovely couple offered to drive me up to the Pilgrim office. So to get from the US to the starting point, I took planes, trains, buses, and a car. And I always tell people, it's pretty common that getting to your Camino starting point is part of, like, the challenge, the first challenge you face, because a lot of these places where the Camino starts, they're not in this some big city you're gonna fly into. Yes, you could start a Camino in Madrid, there is a route, but it's not very popular. It's not I don't know a ton about it. But you can start any Camino in any, town along that route, but getting to even some of the major towns in Spain, you can't bank on the fact that you're going to be able to you want to really make sure you do your research. And this is one of the things I help my clients with is from once you first of all, where to fly into, and then also how to then get to your starting point and when to actually start, with jet lag and all that kind of stuff. So I should mention that, when I got to JFK, the first time I ever put a backpack on my back, with my stuff in it was the night before I left. I don't recommend this. At the time, I didn't know that there were services that would transport your bag from place to place. So I had everything that I was going to bring with me on my back in a backpack. At the time, too, I was on a very strict budget because I was doing this year of not working and taking a sabbatical. And so once I found out that there were services that would send your bags ahead, I was like, oh, I don't have, I'm not going to waste an extra, I think it was like €4 or something like $5 a day to send your bag. And I was like, I'm doing this for 30 days. That's a lot. Yeah, and so Phil, yeah, I'm guessing you're saying that people could carry a pack to go up to Machu Picchu, or they could have it transported for them. And so yeah, the Camino, it's one of the wonderful things I love about it is that there are so many ways to do it. And so you can carry a backpack and stay in hostels. You can have your bag transported. You can stay in private rooms with private bathrooms. You can stay in paradors, which are former convents and monasteries and castles that have been turned into 4-star, 5-star hotels in Spain. Like there's so many ways to do the Camino. So it's one of the things that I really love about it. But I should also mention that most everything that was in my backpack, was either bought used or borrowed because, again, as I mentioned, I was not a hiker. I still don't really even consider myself a hiker. I'm just addicted to the Camino, and that's what I do. But so I wasn't about to spend money buying dry wicking whatever because I'm never gonna do this again. So, thankfully, I had a marathon running sister. She had some dry wicking shirts she was getting rid of. I'd never worn a dry wicking shirt in my life. I had a friend who gave me hiking sticks. I had no idea how to use them, but I thought it would be a good idea to have them. My backpack, I bought at a used gear sale. The guy I got it from worked for this outdoor gear store. He had never heard of the Camino de Santiago. Um, and I kind of told him what it was. I told him I wasn't going to have to carry a tent or anything. And I think that first backpack, it might have been like 40 liters or something. It was way more than I ever needed, for the Camino, but that's what I had. Someone had given me a gift card for, like, a going away kinda present. I used that to buy some rain gear, but I didn't even know about rain, covers for your backpack. So there's pictures of me. I just posted one, today, actually. You can see my backpack, is covered with basically a plastic bag. That's what I figured out the first day it rained, and I was like, "I don't have these fancy things I see on everybody's backpack." It didn't come with my used back. And so found a garbage bag somewhere, and I did that, and I kept saying to some of the friends I met along the Camino, like, "I should probably get a backpack cover," and my friends would say, "We really like seeing you with the garbage bag. It's just kind of just fun, and it makes us smile, da, da, da." I was like, "Okay, I'll just keep doing that." So just to give you this sense of how, um not a hiker I was when I started the Camino. And a lot of people that do the Camino have never in their lives done anything like this before. There are some people who have hiked before and maybe have done a 10 or 12-mile hike. And when they say that to me, I will often say, "And then did you get up the next day and do another 12-mile hike? And the next day, another 12-mile hike?" Because that's what the Camino is. And that's really what gives people the sense of like, oh, so even if you are physically fit, you go to the gym every day, cool. But walking 10 to 12 to 15 miles every day, is usually unlike anything most people have done. And so I usually tell people the best training is to get out there and start walking. And now our phones keep track of every single step. So you don't even need a pedometer anymore. Okay, so I'm finally, I get to JFK. I am carrying this crazy backpack, and the woman at JFK tells me she doesn't think it will fit in the overhead bin and she wants me to check it. And this terrifies me because when I was like 8 or something, we went on a family trip and they lost like some of our suitcases forever. We never got them back. And so I grew up in a family that was trained on carry-on luggage. And so the fact that and then the other thing was this was the only stuff I had with me. So I had this vision like if I got to France and my pack wasn't there, I couldn't do the trip. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to check this bag. And so she said to me, well, there's, those little metal things that they have where you have to put your bag in to prove that it's good for the overhead. I knew it was because I had actually been doing some traveling just before the Camino, internationally, and it fit in the overhead bin. But it wasn't Air France and it wasn't her. So I went to this bin and I took out the water bottles I had on either side and I stuffed that pack into that metal container. And she, gave me one of those French, like satisfied, like, all right, fine, you crazy American looks. And I took my backpack with me through security. Um, so uh, I, actually met my first pilgrims, on one of my flights, and they, told me about their training. They were very, thin and fit and like muscles. Like you could see muscles on their legs and on their like they had biceps, these women, like 2 women. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like what am I doing?" Um, Now it turns out, spoiler alert, one of them ended up not even finishing it. She got injured along the way or something. So just to, prove the point, like, I mean, I was looking at them like, well, they're definitely going to make it to Santiago. I don't know about me. And you just don't know. If there's anything I've learned over the years, it's, I can never judge if anyone's going to make it to Santiago or not. I've volunteered a lot on the Camino. I've seen people on their first day on the Camino, and there's some people that walk in, and I'm like, wow, that's a really big backpack, or, they've already got, like, a knee brace on, and I'm like, "They haven't even started yet, and they've got a knee brace." But I don't say anything because, when I'm at that starting point volunteering, our training is that it takes so much for people to get to that first to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. We're there just for encouragement and to give them the information we have, to answer their questions. We are not allowed to say anything about the size of a backpack or anything, unless they ask us about it. In that pilgrim office in France where some people can start, we have a hook hanging down. You can actually weigh your pack. And so when people weigh it, sometimes I'll go over and make conversation. And if they want some advice, I will happily give some. But yeah, thanks, Sherry. I love telling these stories. So yeah, so I met these women at the airport and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." And even before that, when I was trying to transfer from Charles de Gaulle to Orly, there's a bus that takes you, I don't know, like a half hour or something between the airports, and I was nervous, was I gonna make my connection? And there was this other American couple I was talking to, that were trying to make this connection as well. And, they had a house in Italy or something, and, when I they asked me what I was doing, and I said this Camino, this trail, and they say, "Oh, yeah, you look like a hiker." And I stood there and I was like, wow, I that's never words I thought I would ever hear in my lifetime, that I look like I belong on this thing. I didn't feel like I belonged for sure. I mean, I'd never I mean, I was in like hiking shoes I'd never even owned before. I mean, I've gone through periods of my life where I didn't even own sneakers. So it was all kind of surreal. So anyway, I had a plan. Um, I used a website called Granze.com. No, I take that back. I have used Granze. I use them too. They're wonderful. There's another site called GoDeSalco.com, and in there you could choose your route, and then you could choose your starting point and your ending point, and then you can kind of play around with, oh, if I it has all the towns listed and what types of accommodations that they have, and then if you click like to go from this one to this one, it auto calculates how many kilometers it is between those towns. So you can auto calculate, well, if I go this far in this day, then maybe I don't want to go as far in this day. And so I had done this. Um, I had done it because I like to have a clue what I'm getting into. I don't need everything completely planned. I also wanted to give my wonderful, amazing parents some reassurance that their daughter going over to Spain to walk for a month on this trail through a foreign country whose language she didn't speak at the time, I wanted to give them some reassurance. And so I came up with this plan on godesalco.com. Uh, Key point that I go over with all of my clients now is don't just go by the distances. You should also look at the elevation chart because it makes a difference if you're going to walk, 12 miles on a lovely flat surface versus over the Pyrenees, for example, which is what I did on the first day. So I had this rough idea, and my darling parents, I think every time I emailed them, because international calling in those days was, like, prohibitively expensive, um, on a cell phone. I called them every once in a while from, like, one of those phone centers that they used to have, for those of you that were around in those days, traveling in Europe. But I would email them a little bit more often, and, I would tell them pretty much every time I emailed them, I would say, "So my plan says I'm in this town, but I'm actually not in this town because I walked a little further or because I'm going a little slower and da 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 da." And my darling mother, thank God, she's Catholic, because she said to me, I said, "Were you, like, nervous when I would send you these emails?" And I was like, "I'm not here, I'm here." And she said, "Oh my gosh, absolutely." But she said, "Every night I just went to bed and I put it in God's hands." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so happy that she's Catholic because I don't know how she would have gotten through this experience, without that." Um, yeah, Amanda, I had forgotten that, yeah, you've done a Camino as well. So Amanda writes that I'm taking her back to all the magic and the feels that start when you decide to do a Camino. Yeah, it's an incredible experience from the moment you decide I'm going to make this happen. I'm just getting chills even saying that. So thank you, Amanda, for bringing that up. I And feel free, Amanda, if you want to jump in with any of your 2 cents about some of your recollections. Feel free to confirm or deny or whatever as far as your experiences as well, because we all have different experiences walking this route. So I finally make it to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, in France. It's a town in the foothills of the Pyrenees. It is very small, but it is very well populated with Camino pilgrims from about May to September. You can walk the Camino any time of year. You can start any day of the year. The pilgrim office in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port is actually open every single day of the year. There are not pilgrim offices all over the Camino. This one, they started, I forget how many dozens of years ago, because so many pilgrims were coming in to walk over, to walk the Camino, and they wanted to make sure that they knew that what they were getting into. Because the first day out of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, for those of you that are going to start your Camino there, that first day or two are the hardest days of the entire Camino. And why is that? Well, because you're crossing the Pyrenees. You're not going through like a super high, like, mountain, I mean, you're going, yes, over a mountain, but you're not going over like the highest heights of the Pyrenees. But you're still climbing pretty much most of the day. And then it's a pretty steep descent into Roncesvalles. And a lot of people, that's what they do that first day. It's 25 kilometers or something, like, which 20 kilometers is 12 miles. So it's like 15 miles or something that some people do on this first day up and then back down. And thankfully, I did do some research before I left, and I knew that I was not going to do that on my first day. There's there was at the time one place you could stay that was a 5-mile walk up. And I had booked ahead to stay there. So I knew on my first day I only had to walk 5 miles. Um, they told me at the pilgrim office that it would take me 3 hours to walk those 5 miles, because it was pretty much just up the entire way. So I'm in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, starting at what I think is the only place to start the Camino de Santiago. And in the pilgrim office, it is an incredible place because you go in there every it was well known at the time that you should go to the pilgrim office first. You should start there. Um, but it wasn't really clear as to why. I knew I could get my credential there, which is the thing that you get stamped as you go along. Um, to prove later on that you've done the Camino, and I've got an example of that here. So this is some of the stamps that I got along one of my Caminos, and so this is a pilgrim credential. This is what it looks like um, when you get it in Spain. It looks different if you order it ahead of time in the U.S. or if you get it when you're in France. And so this is what you get stamped along the way. Every place, everybody's got stamps. Every, hotel, restaurant, bar, hostel, man on the side of the street selling trinkets, they all have stamps. And honestly, to me, this, pilgrim credential means more to me than the Compostela certificate that you get at the end. Because this I can look through, and sometimes I even started jotting notes of, "Oh, yeah, this was the place where I stopped and I met so and so," or "This was the one where, that guy helped me with my weight in my backpack and da 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 da." So, anyway, that's I knew I had to get a credential, and so I went to the pilgrim office, and that was my big goal. But in there, they also have this list of every hostel along the Camino route. So if you're staying in private rooms, hotels, that kind of stuff, you don't need that list. But if you're going to stay in hostels, then you want that list. And on my first Camino, again, I didn't realize that you could stay anywhere other than a hostel. And so I took the list very gratefully. And at the time, I think it was half as big as it is now because I have now volunteered in that office. I've been on the other side of the desk 4 times. And every time I go, I'm amazed at how many more places there are to stay. The Camino has definitely grown in popularity. And so I got that list, and they also give you the elevation chart for the entire Camino de Santiago. And that's when I realized, oh, that's kind of a big deal. They made sure to point out that the worst elevation gain I was going to have was going to be the next day or two over the Pyrenees of the entire Camino. There is another mountain range that you cross further on in Spain, but if you're doing the Camino Frances, by that point you've been walking for like a few weeks, and it doesn't feel nearly as bad. Um, who had Amanda, I know you've done this. So at Osabrero is another elevation that you get to. And some people, remember that elevation as well. But for me, I just remember it as just beautiful, beautiful views, beautiful. I don't remember it as being as physically challenging as other people had thought it would be. Um, so I got my credential, I got my elevation map, which was quite intimidating. I got the list of hostels. They also ask you there if you have a place to stay for the night. They have a map of the town with all of the different places you can stay. Note to those of you who are considering this, if you're going to start your Camino in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in May or September, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you have a reservation in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. They do have backup plans upon backup plans for if the town gets full. They've got, I think they open up the gym or something. I mean, it's crazy. So I would definitely recommend you consider. I mean, I the clients I work with are making reservations for their entire Camino. But I know some of you on here might want to do it a little more impromptu, which is kind of how I did my first one. So anyway, I so let's see here. So I got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, um, and Oh, the other thing is in the pilgrim office, there are 4 or 5 volunteers there, and they speak various languages. So on the front of their little desk table area, it says what languages they speak. And so when you walk in, and you're waiting on a line usually because everybody has heard go to the pilgrim office first. So you get off the train and everybody heads to the pilgrim office. Um, Now that I volunteered there, whenever the trains come in, I would go outside and be like, "Listen, we are here all day. You can go to your accommodation and come back later. There will be less people, blah, blah, blah." But some people, plenty of people just stay there because they feel like that's what they need to do, which is fine. And you get to meet people along the, other pilgrims as you're standing in line. You have conversations. So anyway, by the time I got into the office, the woman that was available to take the next person spoke only French or Spanish. And I had taken high school French. I had lived 6 weeks in Switzerland with a French speaking family. Otherwise, I don't think I'd remember any of it. And she said to me, and she asked if I spoke French. And much to my surprise, I said, yes, a little. And because none of the English speakers were available. So she explained to me in French that she doesn't speak English, but if she wanted me to explain, all of this stuff in French, she could do that. And so I said, okay. And I sat down. So my first Camino experience in that pilgrim office, everything she said to me was in French. And stunningly, I understood it. And I think part of it is because she had visuals. So, when she was talking about the credential and she was talking about the stamps, then I understood what she was talking about. So that was, that kind of left me on a high too, because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in France and I just had an entire conversation in French. And I haven't spoken French in how many years? So anyway, and we Saint Jean Pied de Port. um, I had stayed in a hostel, but I was the only one in my room. So I actually had a room to myself, which I loved because of jet lag. I tell people if you can, and for those of you that have flown to Europe before, you probably know this. The best thing you can do is stay up till at least 9 o'clock that first day when you arrive. Do not take a nap. Keep yourself going, keep yourself busy, and the earliest you can go to sleep is 9 o'clock at night. If you do that, and if you do not ever think of what time it is back in the US. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. None of that. Then the next morning you wake up and it's like magic. At least that's what it is for me. If I can stay up till 9 p.m. that first night, I'm good to go after that. So yeah, do not, please, please, please do not take a nap that first day. It's going to make your life really hard. But anyway, I did have jet lag though, so I couldn't get to sleep, it was all kinds of messed up, so I was glad there was nobody else in my room. I then got up and I, basically unpacked my entire backpack to try and figure out what I could get rid of, because as for those of you that were here for that part, I had never put my backpack on my back until the night before I left. And so I did find some things that I could leave for future pilgrims, etc. And you'll see these along the Camino. There are places at different accommodations where people will leave stuff that they don't need or want to carry, and they'll leave it for other folks. And so, anyway, I did some of that, and I didn't leave Saint Jean Pied de Port. Most people, and this is one of the reasons that I'm very glad that I was in a room by myself, is because most people that leave Saint Jean that first morning are going those 24 kilometers or whatever over the Pyrenees that first day. And so they're leaving at 5:30, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, some of them are leaving a little bit later. They kind of spread themselves out. But if I had been in a room with other people who were leaving at that hour, I mean, I would have had to be awake. So thankfully, being in my own room, I could sleep to my heart's content, get up a little later, enjoy my last French croissant. Um, and kind of watch the pilgrims go by, because I knew I only had a 3-hour walk. And so I decided, I think around like 10 o'clock in the morning, okay, it's time. I'm going to head out. And at that point, the people that I met walking, we're also going to stay at that place that's 5 miles up. It's called Orison. There are now a couple other places to stay in that vicinity. But once you get past that point, really, you have to go all the way over, unless you want to sleep on the mountain. There's some shelters there for the shepherds, and some of those, robust 20-something-year-olds do that. Not my idea of fun at all. I didn't know that existed at the time, but once I did, I was like, yeah, go you, but that's definitely not for me. And so yeah, and that first day is hard. Um, at least for someone like me who had done her training, but not a whole lot with any elevation. And I had these hiking sticks that I had never used in my life. I had been on a couple hikes where I just like grabbed a stick and used it to like help me get up a little hill or something, but I didn't really know how to use them. And honestly, my shoulders were hurting, and I didn't know if it was because of my pack or because of the sticks or what. I was like, the sticks don't feel like they're helping. Well, no, because I didn't know how to use them properly. But thankfully, this delightful Frenchman, probably in his like 50s or something, who he came up behind me and, "Bonjour, ça va?" And he had clearly been watching me from as he was walking up behind me, and he politely asked me, if I had ever used sticks before, and I said, "No, not really." And he said, "Would you like me to show you how to use them maybe a little bit better?" He was just so genuinely kind about it, and I said, "Yes, please do show me what to do." And he showed me how to walk where you do the opposite leg and the opposite arm. And it took some practice. And there were times where I literally had to stop and be like, okay, right foot, left arm, left foot, right arm. Like, and then I could get in the zone after, like, I think a day or two. I could just walk like a four-legged creature without a problem. And those sticks, man, I use them the entire way. I would never do a Camino without sticks, but I've met 85-year-olds who do the Camino without hiking poles. My father, we go a week together on the Camino every year. He's 70, I don't know, 7 now. Um, he'll he'll take one hiking pole, but he mostly carries it. He'll use it once in a while to go down a hill, but hardly at all. So it's up to you, but I loved the momentum. I felt like it took weight off of my back, off of my joints, and various folks that I have met in the medical field have said, yes, that's exactly what it does. Um, the other thing I forgot to mention is the shell. So this is the symbol of the Camino de Santiago, and you can pick one of these up on this route in that pilgrim office. They have these by donation, and you can just grab whichever one appeals to you and you hang it from your backpack. And it has now become the symbol of the Camino. Cool behind the scenes fact, since I volunteered in this office, we get these in that office in boxes of like, I don't know, 600 at a time or something. And we have a little machine in the back where when we don't have as many pilgrims to talk to, one of us will go in the back and we put the little hole in it, and then we tie the little string in it, and we bring them out and keep stock. Or somebody just puts a bunch of holes in a ton of them, and then they bring the basket out to the rest of us, and the rest of us put the strings on. So just a little behind the scenes kind of thing. I loved that. And every once in a while, if I saw a really cool shell, I'd be like, "Ooh, this is the one I'm going to take for my next Camino." So you have these affixed to your pack, and this is basically how people know that you're a Camino pilgrim. Although we're pretty much all dressed in hiking clothes and we have hiking shoes on, and we either have a day pack or a backpack. It's not really hard to tell who's a Camino pilgrim. But if you get into like a bigger city like Pamplona or Burgos or whatever, so yeah, we all have these hanging from our backpacks. There's some traditions about why this is the symbol and how it came to be the symbol. We don't really have proof. There are some stories about St. James, and I forget if it was some battle or something, but him coming out of the ocean covered in these shells. There's legends or stories that the pilgrims would, after getting to Santiago, walk onto the ocean and pick up one of these as proof that they had been to Santiago de Compostela. And then on the way back, they would use it like to drink out of for fountains and streams and stuff like that. That's the necklace that I have on. So it's the symbol of the Camino, and you'll see it all over the Camino. It's on a lot of the trail markers. And the other marker is the yellow arrow. So that's the other thing that you'll see marked. And so yeah, I that first day was, yes, definitely the hardest thing I've probably ever done. I made it. It did take me just about 3 hours. And the other thing is, like, I'm meeting people, and we're chatting to the point that I can as I'm huffing and puffing up this hill. And when I when you're looking if you're going to stop in Orasan or Borda, when you are hiking up there, you are to the point. I mean, it was 3 hours. I was like, "Where is this place?" And it's one of those things where you literally turn a corner, and all of a sudden it appears, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, thank God." Because from a distance, you can see the road continuing, and you can see, like, there's nothing on it. But where this place is in this little, like, alcove or whatever. I mean, it's a big place, but, just the way the road is situated, and it is stunningly beautiful, this walk. I mean, you're walking the higher and higher you get, like, I took tons of pictures. I've done this part of the walk, I don't know, 4 or 5 times now, and I still take pictures because it's still so stunningly beautiful, and it gets more and more beautiful as you go up. I mean, it's just piles of mountains upon mountains, depending on the time of year, you may see some that are still snow covered. Depending on when you start, you might be walking in the snow. um, I started this Camino, like, mid-May of 2012. The week before, it had snowed up there. It was gone at that point, but people had started the week before, I had been told, a lot of them just heard about the snow and they just turned around and went home, and that's because they were Europeans. So when the Europeans come, they can, take a $100 flight and get to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port and walk for a week on the Camino. But if you're coming from the US, if it snows up there, there is an alternate route. The route that I did, the Napoleon route up and over, is not open year round, and they decide when to open it, based on, snow and weather and all that kind of stuff. If you go up there and it is officially closed and you walk it anyway, that's, all kinds of fines. And if you get injured, whether however, if you're up there legally or not, if you get injured, you do have to pay for them to whatever, bring in the helicopter to get you out, da, 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 which is why, I recommend that everyone has travel insurance, not just medical insurance, but travel insurance. For those of you that don't know the difference, travel insurance will cover things like changing your flights, staying longer in a hotel, or, any anything, that costs money, like the helicopter ride off the Pyrenees, for example. So when you're looking at travel insurance, you wanna make sure that you're looking for all of these various features. When I work with, my clients, when I lead my group trips, travel insurance is required, and I go over all the features that the travel insurance that you get should have. I'll probably do a post about that at some point. Um for those of you that are, still watching here, I'm gonna go on for just, till I'm at about an hour, so another 8 minutes or so, and then there will have to be a part 2 because there's no way to talk about a 500-mile walk across Spain, in just 1 hour. So, I do get to Orasan. One of the cool things about Orasan is that they do a community meal. Now, for those of you that are looking for private rooms, I don't know that they have private accommodations at Orasan, but there are other accommodations on your way up the mountain, that do have private rooms. There's also an option for you to walk up to various points on that first day and then get a shuttle back down. And then the shuttle will bring you back up the next day to that same point, and you can go over. So in that way, you could stay 2 nights in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and you don't have to worry about having a place to stay on the mountain, and you don't have to worry about trying to go over the whole thing in 1 day. The company that does that is called Express Borico. They're delightful. They're just a few doors down from the Pilgrim office. You can book ahead of time. They also will take your pack for you over the Pyrenees. They'll also pick you up at the Biarritz airport and bring you to Saint-Jean. They have a lot of services that they offer, and, I highly recommend them a lot for various clients that are starting, in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. So I haven't, let's see here, I've used them to get from the airport. I haven't used their services, the shuttle service, but know that it's available, because some people will come to us in the Pilgrim office that first day and finally realize, like, "Holy crap, I can't do this tomorrow." So I will tell them about, get them to bring your bag over. I'll tell them about the shuttle service, so you only have to walk up this far or this far or this far. There's, like, a few different points, and they'll bring you back and da da da. So anyway, Orasan does this lovely community meal. So does Auberge Borda, which is another place you can stay up there. I love when they do the community meals. Orasan, I think everybody stands up and says where they're from, why they're doing the Camino. And some of those people, like, are people that I just kept running into the whole time. Some of them became really good friends. Um, and one of the, first people I met at Orison, um, eh, we walked together quite a bit, and he got to Santiago before me, and then the day I walked in, we were in touch via WhatsApp. He actually waited for me in front of the cathedral to welcome me in, so all of those wonderful things. Hi, Catherine, miss you too, wonderful to see you on here. So yeah, so for any of you that have any questions in these last few minutes, I'll continue on, to get to a certain point, for another 5 minutes or so, but feel free to ask any questions you have, about the Camino. So yeah, so that second day was nice because now we're all getting up, we're having breakfast together at, like, I don't know, 7 in the morning or something. Um, and we are now walking, the rest of the way over the mountain to Roncesvalles. Um, and it's interesting because when you leave Orison, like, I left, I don't know, 7:30 in the morning, I'm seeing people that came up from Saint-Jean. So they've already been walking for 3 hours, and they're just getting to my point, and I just woke up and had breakfast, and now I'm starting, and I'm like, "Oh, thank God." I can't even fathom it being 7:30 in the morning or 8 in the morning, and I only just got here because I was so exhausted when I got to that point. I just couldn't fathom having to keep going. Um, so you keep going over the mountain. There is now, a wonderful guy. He's been there for quite a few years now. I think his name is Michel. He has his own food truck, up there on the mountain. This is not, an American food truck. He's a farmer. He sells his own cheeses. He's got drinks. He'll make you like a cheese sandwich or something. He has hot chocolate because I mean, by the time you get to him, the temperature has changed. So I mean, if you're going, in the summertime, it's probably gonna be pretty hot, but, I was there in May and June, and you can feel the temperature changing the higher you climb. And so Michel is like your last stop for any sustenance, besides what you brought with you, and because initially you're walking basically on a road, like a road that not too many people are driving on, but once you get to Michelle, you veer off and start on the trail to go over the mountain. And then once you get to the height of the mountain, which for those of you that have started in Saint Jean, I think you get to the highest point, like something crazy, like 21 kilometers in. Like you're climbing for 21 kilometers, like 12 miles. Um, and then you spend a few miles going down, which has its own, challenges and fun times and such. And that's somebody had told me about crisscrossing to go down. Oh my gosh, I do that all the time now. So if you're going down a hill and if it's paved, it's easier. But instead of walking straight down, you zigzag. So you walk towards the left and then you turn and walk towards the right and towards the left and towards the right. And you look crazy, but it so helps your knees. Oh my goodness. It's such a difference on your knees. Um, the other thing is once you get to the height, there are 2 ways you can go. Well, back in the day, there were 2 ways you can go. Now they tell everybody, "Do not go straight," because the descent is so steep and they've had to rescue too many people from that descent. But there's a different way to go around, and that way I love because you can actually see the town in the distance, and when I say town, Roncesvalles has, like, I don't know, 20 year-round residents or something crazy like that. But it's a huge monastery there, and you can see that in the distance, which, can be good or bad because it looks so darn far away. Um, but you eventually get down there somehow, and finally get into Roncesvalles, and you are just so darn grateful that that whole part is now over. Um, it's incredible. It's a cool little place. You should definitely there's tours that they sometimes offer. Amazing. They do a pilgrim mass in the evening. Even if you're not religious, I would still go to it. It's just a great way to kind of, I don't know, start this experience. And the cool thing for me was that when I went to the pilgrim mass, the priest was walking down the aisles asking if anybody spoke English, and I thought he was giving out, like, the whatever, like, the mass information or something in English, and I said, "Yes, English," and he hands me something, and it's the reading, that they're gonna do at the mass. It's like the second reading or something, and then he motions me. He doesn't speak English, and he motions me, and he sits me someplace else, and he points to this other woman who tries to explain to me that I'm gonna be doing the second reading in English, that they do the readings in different languages. Um And so, I at that first pilgrim mass that I ever attended, I read, I still have the passage that I read, and it was incredible. And the next morning, that priest was out on where the trail leaves town, wishing everyone a buen camino, and he remembered my name, and I was just, I mean, I'm getting chills. It was just incredible. The whole thing is amazing. So anyway, I've been talking here for about an hour now on my first Camino, and we're only on day 2. I am not going to be this detailed for every single day of the Camino, but that start, you just remember. I mean, you remember so many details. I've also written it down. I had a journal, and so I have it. I have it all. And so, anyway, I will continue this next week, starting off in Roncesvalles and telling you a little bit more about my Camino experiences and how I got started on what has now become, I don't know, over 15 Caminos, and become my business, the Camino Calls. So, for those of you that want more information about the Camino, highly recommend subscribing to inspiration.thecaminocalls.com. And I will see you guys all back here next Wednesday. Bye bye.